We're live. Welcome to Static Sites, the Static Site fan club with Zach and Mike. See if that has
What's
a
it
ring
called?
to it.
Yeah. We'll just go through that. We'll just keep adding more and more options every week, I feel like.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've got a few interesting things to talk about today. I think we're going to do a roundup of some World Wide Web news and things happening in the web. And then I've been doing a lot of thinking and plugging away on the 11T open source RSS reader. So I'm keen to go through that and get feedback from you, Zach, and anyone on chat too. So
Yeah, that'll be good.
yeah, maybe we
Which one do you
start
want to
there.
start with?
Yeah, let's start RSS.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll talk through it a little bit to begin with, like kind of what I've been thinking and have discovered. So yeah, the whole goal of the RSS reader is there's a lot of paid products out there that have mobile support and have all these fancy bells and whistles. But I think what I want in an RSS reader is just something where I can read posts, and it feels nice to have that self-hosted on my own website and be public, and then kind of create this social network that I can see other people's RSS readers and see their feeds and get ideas of people I can follow. Yeah, I think there's a lot of cool things we can do in that space. So, like, as I've been building it out, I've just been thinking about, I guess, like the development in CSS philosophy, and like, because I want it to be a pretty good, very, very minimal, like no extra fluff or anything, just the bare
You don't want to add
essentials.
a bunch of third-party dependencies.
Yeah, dependencies, like keep dependencies. If there is a dependency, it should be very intentional.
Mm.
And then with the CSS as well, like I started with Cube CSS from is it Andy Bell, and I pulled it back a little bit. Then I was like, what if if it was just semantic HTML? Because I want someone to be able to come in and just delete the CSS if they want to start from scratch, or like just tweak on top of it. Kind of have the best of both worlds. And if you're not cluttering up the HTML with a bunch of classes and things like that, then it's quite freeing. Just X the CSS, start from scratch.
Yeah, I think isn't CSS Naked Day coming up? When is that?
Oh,
Are
I
you
haven't heard
familiar with
about
that?
this. No, tell me.
Yeah, let me look it up real quick. April 9th. Oh, yeah, it's like in the next couple weeks.
We should launch this on April 9th. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, CSS Naked Day. Let me link it up in the chat. Yeah, there it is.
Okay.
Yeah, April 9th, it's kind of like this day of celebration where people like remove their CSS files for that day. And it kind of
Wow.
showcases how your site looks with just raw semantic HTML. And I think maybe the biggest repercussion that I've seen, because I've sort of done this a few times, and yeah, I think the biggest repercussion on my own stuff is just image sizes. Like, some of the image icons that I have, when there isn't CSS applied to them, they're huge. Like, I think maybe we've all encountered a site where the CSS hasn't quite loaded yet, and the SVG icons that they're using render like monstrously, especially if they're using asynchronous CSS loading. But yeah, CSS Naked Day is awesome.
Yeah, interesting. So did that make you go back and add like words with attributes?
Yeah, I mean, it challenged my assumptions on those things, because I did sort of a blog post, a deep dive into sort of fluid width image CSS a few years back, and that sort of resulted in this change to the 11D image utility where
Mm,
we actually prefer the largest image dimensions in the output HTML of our responsive, of like the picture syntax. So when there's a bunch of different widths in there, the width and height attributes that show up in your image tag, we actually use the largest ones.
mm,
Um, and that's just due to some, you'll have to read the blog post. It's like due to some like idiosyncrasies around the aspect ratio and then like max widths of things as the image renders. And yeah, I don't know. I don't think that I made changes to that. No. I mean, maybe for like things that are supposed to render small and don't use that picture syntax and have a bunch of variants and things. But yeah, as you get into more complex responsive images, yeah, I still use the largest,
mm.
the largest width and height attributes
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, but that's it. That's such an interesting like day to have. Like it just builds so much awareness. Um
Yeah, if you go to my website now, there's and you scroll all the way down to the footer. Um, maybe I can just maybe I can just share real quick. Let me share my entire screen. There we go. So yeah, if you scroll down to the bottom of my website, there's goodness, hide that. Okay, there's a like little toggle, and you can toggle on the CSS or
oh
toggle off,
nice. Yeah, I think I
toggle
have
on the
seen that
CSS.
actually. That's
Yeah, and
great.
that's kind of inspired by that. So you can do CSS naked day whenever you want.
Mm.
But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to derail.
Ah, and you've yeah. No, that's awesome. Really cool. Oh, and trigger web fonts as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just switch it back to its
Yeah.
system.
But that yeah, it's a good like that sort of thing has been really top of mind for building this because it's easy to well get down like a rabbit hole of what web font should I use and what evokes the feeling I want to
Yeah,
give for this template. But it's like if you just default to a safe web font, then you don't have all this craft that if someone wants to build on top of it, they have to remove and replace with their own one. Like just super minimal baseline, and then it just allows people to have a lot of freedom to build on top of it without having to undo everything. Um,
and
so
that kind of
yeah,
goes back to. I just want to also shout out like the headless component movement of like delivering these reusable components that don't have a ton of styling to them.
mm,
Um, and
true.
I really love that. Like if you go to a lot of my web components demos, it's like using Times New Roman and yeah, all of this like just as much stock stuff as possible because I want the sort of nuts and bolts of it to be reusable and the theming to just be a secondary concern.
Yeah, yeah. It's been like it's made me want to create a bunch of templates. Like I want to do a. I'm gonna um do a personal blog one next for myself, and so just build like the very baseline is this really stripped back thing, and then my blog will build on top of that and just add a little bit more. Um, yeah, it's I'm really into it.
Yeah, I
So
feel like you can make a whole career out of deciding those sort of tension points between what's reusable and what you should throw away.
yeah, so um, so I'm on a Windows machine, so all my coding is done in Ubuntu VirtualBox. So that's what this is. And this is
Amazing.
just like I've been working on my Mac to do it, and it's just using serif, not sans serif font. Um,
Mm.
so it actually looks quite different on Ubuntu. It's interesting. Um, so let me talk you through what I've got so far, and I'm very keen. Hey Stefan, very keen to hear any feedback and challenge any thinking I have and any ideas for this. I'm very open to. There's a lot of 11T releases.
Yeah, have you mocked this up with like is this just
So this
a fake
is
feed or is this just
yeah fake feed.
okay.
It's like it's very just a little bit
Oh, nice.
11T to get the repetition, but no RSS or anything. It's basically just a static site. Not that it wouldn't be anyway, but built as a static site.
Yeah.
Um, 11 feed. What do you think of the name?
I mean, you gotta go into it, right? That's 11's the best number. What else would you do? I feel like,
That's it.
do you remember that there was like this web browser uh release thing that they did for a while where I don't remember what browser it was, but they jumped from like, I don't know, it was like they jumped major versions by like a bunch of different numbers. Tempted to do that with 11D and just
Mm.
switch, go to 11D V11.
I mean, I feel like that was Chrome's strategy early on. Like you can have IE8 or you can have Chrome like version 50. And
Mm,
if you're a newcomer, you're like, well, the 50's better, clearly. Like that. And
yeah, exactly.
and you like I felt like it was stuck on each version, whereas Chrome like just
Mm.
constantly moving. Even just the perception of that is pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think that might have been Edge when they switched from their own rendering engine to use Chromium. Uh,
Mm.
yeah, they maybe jumped from like Edge 18 to like match Chrome's version number.
Stefan, is there a reason why 11 is the best number? Is that the reason for 11T's name?
No, I'll link the blog post up that explains the origin of 11D's name, but it's just how I used to count when I was a kid. And I thought that the numbers should, in English, the numbers should have been represented by, uh, there's like an inconsistency between 11 and I want to say 12, or it should be 11 teen, 12 teen, 13,
Yeah. I mean,
14.
that would be easier, right? Is there a difference between uh like this spelling and then spelling it out as a word? What's the difference there?
Yeah, I mean, everyone asks me that question, and
Mm,
really the origin of that is just username registration, but um, like the name was reserved when I was trying
uh,
to sign up for things, so that's why I used 11TY.
mm,
But now it's sort of grown into the number is like the organization, and then spelled out is like the like the command line tool in the open source project.
got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so 11 feed. I don't know if that's going to be confusing when people say it, but I thought it was kind of clever. Uh, so we have our categories here. Like I went back and forth of whether you even need categories, and I think it's an interesting feature. Um, and it's also optional. Like it would be pretty easy to rip the categories out. Then dark mode. Uh, I'm wondering if there's. I know you can detect from the OS and default to either light mode or dark mode. Is there a way to keep that or like have the toggle functionality without JavaScript?
Not without edge rendering.
Mm,
Um, because to persist that, you would need to, yeah, save it in a session cookie or save it somewhere, local storage, and then apply that.
yeah.
Um, I mean, I this is one of the things that I usually am okay with using JavaScript for, as long as the JavaScript renders before the page renders. And if you put your sort of class application JavaScript in your head, um, then that should be good enough for this small use case. But
Yeah, I think so. And to Stefan's point, couldn't you rely on system colors? Yeah, I think like default to that, and that will handle 95% of what people want. And then maybe this button isn't here if JavaScript isn't enabled. Uh, JavaScript enables it, and then if you want to toggle it, you can.
yeah, I kind of have punted on that on a few sites where I'll have a dark mode, but it doesn't have a toggle.
Mm.
um, so I don't know. I
Yeah,
think that's
I can.
maybe a non-MVP version.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's like, why would you toggle it? It's a good question. Like if you've
I
said you
mean,
like dark mode.
I think there's some situational accessibility reasons for that.
Mm.
Just just consider it from like I have on my laptop, it switches from dark mode to light mode at a system level when it gets dark outside, and I
Oh, I
like that.
see. So suddenly
And
you click on a link and the whole website just switches from light to dark at a certain
yeah,
time
the
of the
whole
day.
OS switches, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I like that actually, especially if I'm using my laptop in bed.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, and so I think that there's a a situation you can be in where you in a dark room or whatever, and it's not dark outside. You still might want to opt into that, but
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Okay, then for the posts, it's easy to add a whole bunch of stuff here, but I just tried to get it down to the minimum. Like you want to know which feed it is. You want to know the title and I think the date slash time, maybe just date. And I was talking with a streaming building this with an US joined, and we were talking about date formats as well. And I kind of went back and forth on a few where I think I started with like the relative time 3 hours ago. Um, yeah, and we kind of ended up if the time was localized and or just easy to change, that's probably yeah a good solution.
yeah, I think what I usually do there is I'll put the the markup time as UTC and then use like a web component to normalize that to the
Ah,
user's time
interesting.
zone.
Yeah,
Um, but I also like feel like relative times are only useful when it's like within the last 24 hours.
yeah.
Or even maybe like the last 2 or 3 days, because anything beyond that, I just want to see the date.
And then a lot of posts will just have the date, so then everything will be on like UTC midnight or whatever.
Mhm.
So then relative time isn't useful if everything's the exact
Yeah,
same time anyway.
yeah, yeah, and it really does need to be. Oh, that's true. Yeah, people posting things and the post time doesn't match the date time. I don't know. That seems like
Yeah,
maybe it's too much of a error handling case to worry about right now. But yeah.
yeah. So that's basically it. And then I haven't built this out, but there's this following 34 feeds, and then you'll click
Mhm,
on there, and it will be a list of all the people you follow, and that's where the export will be as well.
mhm.
Then you can click on one of these and it doesn't work. Maybe oh yeah. And pretty, again, try to be super minimal with this. Some chat GPT 11t 5.0 launch content. um, yeah. So then I just have this one mechanism for getting back. And I think without JavaScript, this would just be slash. With JavaScript, it would do a back if there is a back, otherwise slash. I'm not sure about that one.
Hmm. Yeah. What would be the benefit of having JavaScript back over
Like if I'm
navigating to
in,
Slash?
let's say I've gone web dev and I've gone like way down here. Like I don't want to go back to slash. I want to go back to where I want to be in web dev and down here. So
Oh, I see. Hmm.
it would keep track of that, I think.
Yeah, that's an interesting design problem. I feel like I would punt on that also,
Mm.
and just have a breadcrumb navigation up there instead of a back
Ah,
button.
yeah. Interesting. But what
That
if
would
you're in
make it.
like, what if I put this in like two categories? How would you do the breadcrumb? Because once I click in, unless I generate lots of
Hmm.
permutations, which would be like it would be the best for the user, but it would explode the build time.
Yeah, that's a fascinating problem. Because yeah, then you'd have to have a separate sort of content page for each
Like category.
category. Yeah,
Mm.
for each post in each category.
Yeah, it would be nicer though. It'd be much more intuitive.
And then you'd have duplicate content like SEO
Yeah.
issues with that. Hmm.
Well, I think because this is going to be public, I feel like the canonical for this should always be the blog post, right? Like you don't want a search engine indexing this. So,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it should just be a list of the categories that it belongs in. It doesn't need to be hierarchical. Um,
mm,
but maybe that's a separate consideration from the back button.
yeah. Hmm. Yeah, that could work. But
Because your
then,
top nav could stay the same, and you could just uh, sort of link the categories that it belonged to.
mm,
That would
but
at
that
least give you consistent nav too.
then you would lose the like going back and I'm scrolled halfway down, which I feel like's pretty core use case when you're reading. Like you
Mm,
go into an article, go back. I don't want to have to like reset to the top every time.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I do I hummed and hard about this one. I don't think it's yeah. This it seems like there's no silver bullet.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other option is to default to like the column view, and then this would be sort of a link to or an iframe to the like post, the real post on someone else's URL.
Mm,
Um, and I feel like that might almost be a better default anyway. Um, I'm tempted to recommend that as a better default because not everyone does full post
yeah,
excerpts uh, and even above that, the more dynamic the post is, the more um, content might not match up how it looks on the rendered site, and even more beyond that, it then becomes a security
true.
concern to just by default include someone else's HTML on your
Yeah,
domain.
it's a good point.
Um, so you could punt on all of those by just having a
Yeah. But then I yeah, like because then you come back and like it's like, well, why not just open that in a new tab? Like that could actually be it would solve all of these problems.
well, because then you lose the sort of app-like interface of reading a bunch of things quickly
Mm.
and
And it's
scrolling between them.
actually on that point as well, the app like I think it would be cool to do a progressive web app that downloads. I haven't done a progressive web app, but it's a good opportunity to learn. But I think it would be cool if it made like I could download all my posts and have it available offline. Um,
Yeah,
which you
that's a
kind
much
of
harder problem if you iframe it.
yeah, yeah. Like I think the option to iframe is interesting. I was talking about this on stream as well because that will link to the post. So it's like, do you provide an option that shows the iframe, or do you just have this link and it's pretty accessible there anyway?
I mean, I feel like we're headed down the right direction of um, you're gonna probably have to security sandbox this content
Yeah.
in some way anyway. So even if you show like the RSS content, you're gonna need to probably render it in an iframe.
Mm,
Um,
interesting.
and I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things that we showcased last week was Feedbin had kind of this feature where you could toggle the full page
Mm,
sort of, or the not the full page, but the, like the origin content rendering on and off.
Mm.
But you're gonna probably have to do the iframe thing anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, just to sandbox it. Interesting. And I guess I could just make the iframe and like it would look exactly the same as this, right? It just being an iframe.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And then
Is
you
it
can worry
like,
about the source rendering later.
yeah. Okay, that's good. Yeah. Any other thoughts in the direction or philosophies or feature set from either Zach or the chat? Hey, Snarling Beast.
What a great username.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I
A lot of
think this
cool
is a great
picture too.
start.
Oh, what?
Is that
That's
possum?
oh, it is a possum. I thought it
That's a
was,
honey badger.
yeah, is it a badger from what's that Flash animation? Like badger, 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 badger.
Nick from Mastodon. I don't know Nick from Mastodon.
Oh, well, welcome. Welcome, Nick from Mastodon. Yeah, so any other last thoughts on RSS readers?
Oh, you're saying that your name was Nick. I'm sorry. I thought you were explaining the yeah, sorry. I thought you were explaining the origin of the avatar. Anyway, I'm catching up. What did you ask, Mike?
Yeah, any more thoughts on the RSS reader? Like yeah, I think if I add the iframe, actually hook up RSS feeds, and then implement some of this functionality, I feel like it's getting. Oh, and I need to build up this page too. Like it's getting pretty there for what I want, like the base of it to be. Like I feel like it's usable and ready for people to build on top of.
Yeah. Yeah, I am really excited to see sort of like the relationship like building piece of this and the export and import features and yeah, I think this is going to be really cool at the end.
Yeah, yeah, I'm excited.
April 9th.
Yeah, that's a good launch day. I think that's very doable. Like basically 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
All right, next segment. We're
Yeah, let me
we're
share my screen. I have I think 3 different sub segments to go through. I have to reshare again. Here we go. I did want to just touch on the Cloud Canon accessibility statement that we have on our site that we launched. Let me hide this because I think it's great. And we sort of published a blog post about it this week. And you can sort of read through what we have here documented as our goals for accessibility for the Cloud Canon product. And I did get a DM on Mastodon after talking about this morning. And I don't know their full name, but it was Antoine sent me a DM on Mastodon, and they sort of clued me into this APCA because we have on our site our goal is the WCAG 2.1 at AA level, and they introduced me to this APCA. It's like a new contrast method, and it's sort of being talked about for WCAG 3.0.
Mhm.
And yeah, I've been reading about it, and I think it's sort of pretty amazing. And I think it's something that we should look at, especially for our accessibility statement. And I think there's sort of all of these concerns right now with the existing color contrast algorithms that they use for WCAG 2. And maybe the easiest way to describe it is to look at this visual comparison. So these red columns here are the APCA, which is this new specification they're working on, and these blue columns here are the WCAG 2. And you can kind of see that for some of these like darker colors, these pass WCAG but fail on APCA. And so, yeah, I think it's a more accurate way to measure color contrast that I'm just learning about, or maybe I heard about and then forgot about it because it isn't part of the official formal standard yet. But yeah, I think
So
it's worth folks knowing about.
yeah, it's interesting. So is it just stricter, or is it measuring in a different way?
Well, I think that it's measuring in a different way. The previous sort of color contrast algorithms that they used were sort of a binary thing, and they were intended or sort of created with a previous generation of display in mind. So they're kind of old and aging, and as our like phone screens get better and our monitors get better and the technology in those improves over time, then the formulas that we use for color contrast need to change as well to match
Mm,
that new technology. And yeah, I think WCAG is maybe it's looking kind of not great.
mm,
um, so yeah, I think just moving towards where I think this is going to go. I think APCA is a great alternative and something worth shooting for. I hope. I wonder what the sort of dev tools um, integration is like for this because I think a lot of existing like dev tools, if you go in here and I don't know if Firefox has one, but you can look at a color and that's like tiny, but it is there. You can see the color contrast here.
mm.
Maybe you can't, but I'll zoom in a little bit. Oh, where'd it go? Yeah, you can see the color contrast here. I don't know if that made it any bigger or not, but this one's like a 6.47, and so it's AAA rated for WCAG. But yeah, it would be nice to see a couple of other. Yeah, you can see the tooltip says WCAG. Um,
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, see
I
some
didn't
of
know
this
that.
DevTools integration. So
Yeah, and this comment from Starling Beast, this is what I need to do. Talking about accessibility, that gray you were using might be too light. Um,
oh yeah,
yeah, yeah, I haven't.
and I
I
think
need to do a
Lighthouse will report
pass.
that as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's with the underlines. Like, I don't want it to be so like really dominant, but it needs to be accessible as well. Like finding that balance. Yeah, I need to do it. Need to
Now I
figure
think I
that
know
out.
who Nick from Mastodon is, based on their conversation. There are a couple of comments there. Okay, I know who you are, Nick.
Whoops. Stuff always makes you take a step back and think about how binary these systems to determine barriers are not great. Yeah. I mean, it's better than it's good that it brings awareness of
Mm,
and you try and get to a certain standard, but it is a spectrum, right? And we're trying to make it binary. It's yeah.
yeah, I think the thing I've always sort of struggled with is text on top of images because the tooling around that is sort of terrible because it would need to sample sort of every pixel around the text as it's rendered. I think text on gradients is another one that's particularly bad,
Mm,
but you can at least measure the extremes of your lightest and darkest gradient point. I mean, maybe not if you have like a ton of different gradient stops, but yeah, that gets into be a fairly complex problem very quickly. But anyway,
would Lighthouse find that on a gradient, or
no,
just it's just
I
like
don't think so.
yeah. I guess that's a lot of
Um,
compute. Would take a lot more time to figure that out.
yeah, I mean, it really does need to like take a screenshot
Mm,
of the node of like the rendered node and then know exactly where the text ends and the image ends and then measure every single point of the outline around the text.
yeah.
It's
But even then, to Starling Beast's point, like you do it, it's somewhat binary because you're doing it you would do that at certain breakpoints. And it's like, well, this
yeah, the
breakpoint,
text can move. Yeah.
yeah. It's
Yeah, that's wild. So, yeah,
Lighthouse
definitely.
Lighthouse uses an X, which unless they've changed their rules, don't do bitmap
Mm,
images.
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good shout. Okay, yeah. So if you go out to read more about APCA, they actually have like a third-party tools system or a list of all these different tools that sort of measure APCA for you. And there's a bunch of really cool ones. I thought this one was really great. I don't think it's like part of Tailwind because it's on UIcolors.app, but it's I guess they use Tailwind to like generate these. You can generate random ones and it will make a valid color scheme for you,
And a gradient.
which is really
That,
cool.
that
Yeah.
also, yeah.
Yeah. If you have a two-color gradient, that becomes I mean, the more stops that you get on a gradient, the more complicated that problem gets, but
I mean, I guess if both colors individually
yeah.
have the right
Yeah, you would have
contrast,
to
then
measure, but I don't know, because if you get into colors that are a gradient and then it, like, flows through other colors in the middle,
yeah, it starts to get complicated.
I don't know how if they actually go into that much detail, but
I
yeah, there's
always
a bunch of
advise
different
I always
sorry, go ahead.
advise started with automated tooling and building on that with testing with real users. You want to invest in
Mhm.
making your feedback processes strong, doing user research, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I wonder if,
I
Snarlin
feel
Beast has any recommendations for good, services to do this kind of feedback through. Can be hard to find sample users, I think. But yeah, I'd be open to feedback there.
yeah, like when I think of large organizations that do accessibility really well, like the UK Gov sites are right up there. I feel like they've built so much awareness and they're just a great example of really putting a lot of thought into it.
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely true. They're like the gold standard, um, for sure. I think the other sort of I don't know method I've seen some folks do to just mostly punt on this problem is to use black and white for almost everything,
Mm.
and then yeah, very sparingly use accent colors.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's
Guaranteed to
a
have good contrast.
yeah, I mean that's a good accessible
Yeah.
default for sure. This one sort of blew my mind because I don't even know what all of these things are doing, but it's yeah, it has some APCA ratings here as well. hughtone.rdov.me. So yeah, that is the shout out to Antoine for sort of recommending going into this rabbit hole of APCA instead of uh, the WCAG 2.1. I think it's a good baseline to have documented on our site, but as a stretch goal until this gets formalized, I think APCA would be a great addition here.
Hmm.
And even adding that as a stretch goal on this page would be good.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. Do you want to do web dev roundup first, or do you want to do web component roundup first?
Oh, you're gonna end
Web
on
dev
web
news.
components.
Okay.
End on web components. It's the
Yeah, we'll do
end
web dev
on
news.
yeah.
I really liked this blog post from David Bushell. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. But there's a whole bunch of button style recommendations for CSS for buttons. And I actually learned a couple of things here. Now there is maybe one caveat on this post, and we'll see if David has updated the feedback that he's gotten live now, but maybe we'll refresh and see. But yeah, I didn't know touch action manipulation. So if you've ever like tapped on a button and the page zooms, you can use this to disable that, and it will disable double tap to zoom,
Huh.
which I was
Wow.
not aware of. Yeah, that's like a very cool thing. Um, yeah, he sort of documents here that the one of the traditional approaches to fix this is to disable zoom in your viewport meta tag. I never do
Mhm.
this. You know, like maximum scale in your meta tag. Yeah, it's a very bad practice. Don't do it. But yeah, this is great. It's a nice other way to do it. Um, I did know this one. You can sort of disable text selection on buttons with user select none, so that the text isn't selectable. I don't know where I am on that one. I feel like it doesn't. I don't know. If you encounter that a lot, maybe it's worth it. But I try to not disable text whenever possible, because you never know what people want to select. But yeah, there's this file selector button pseudo element that you can use to style the input file type button, which I thought was great. I didn't know about that either.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah, interesting.
oh,
Is
he
that
did. He did update it. Amazing. Okay. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
yeah? What is that? Like, widespread browser support? I've never seen that.
Yeah, yeah. I thought he had it documented here. But let's look. Let's look. Let's look.
Oh,
Yeah, look at
damn.
that. Green, 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 green. Yeah, that's great. Safari 12.5 partial support, but even they had like a WebKit file upload button. So yeah, very comprehensive support. That's great. Yeah, there was some recommendations around focus visible, which I think is great. This is what I was referring to earlier. There was some outline none disabling CSS here, which I think is a bad practice, and they got some feedback on Mastodon about that, and yeah, updated it this morning, which is amazing. So yeah, this is visible, focus visible. I don't know if you're familiar. Is the way to like have a focus style, but not have it apply when the user is like not using keyboard navigation.
Okay.
So if like someone clicks on a button, you don't necessarily want it to be focused, or
Interesting.
at
But
least you
if
don't
you're
want it to
tabbing,
show
like,
the focus styles.
so that outline none is a no-no because if you're tabbing through it, it'll just be invisible when you tab to that button.
Yeah, if the browser doesn't have focus visible support. So
Mm,
they could have like wrapped this in like a supports block, but
mm,
yeah, I think that moving forward, focus visible is good enough now that you can just style that directly without having
mm.
to disable anything. Um, yeah, and that's great. Logical size properties. I don't know. I think this is mostly around just setting the size of your buttons to fit to the content rather than um, yeah. Width is a banned property in my style sheets. That's an interesting thing that I don't think I've read anywhere else before. But
I think it's this is Snarling based. I think it's controversial because it assumes a lot about what modalities. I don't know that
mm,
word. Focus are useful for who. Knowing where you are on a page can be useful for all and not just keyboard users.
mm.
What does modalities mean?
I think it's just a fancy way of saying modes.
Mm.
But yeah,
So what's
pointer
the
users
difference?
versus keyboard users.
What's the difference between inline size for content and just like an inline element? Because that would an inline element without a width or anything. Well, you can't have a width on an inline element.
That's a good question. I don't know if I know the answer to that. Do you want to try it? Let's test it live. We need a. Oops. Uh-oh. I gotta log in.
Or is this if you want to block level elements, but to behave sort of that
Hmm.
not to find a width, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it would still keep its block sizing
We do
properties.
these Snarling Beast, we do these once a week, same time. I've been doing it This is probably like our fifth or sixth one. We've been very consistent. Start on the dot, try and end on the dot.
Oh yeah, we only have 15 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, wait, let me share.
Oops.
Okay. This is good though. Okay.
All right. Oh, we probably need to. We need to change it from that like default. Maybe this. There's like a weird quick quirk that I feel like a lot of people don't know about. Where buttons, you can't style them unless you like take them out of this like default button mode. And I think if you set a border or a background on them, then it
oh,
takes them out
interesting.
of this mode. But I don't see any actual changes being applied here.
Button is inline, but yeah, must be. And then take away inline size. Hmm. What if you did width 100% and then put on the inline size? I don't know why you'd do that, but I'm just curious what would happen. Ooh.
How's that different from just not having width at all?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's worth more investigation. Maybe we'll go through that another time. Makes the button use the available space, but doesn't exceed the max content of the button. So maybe it has to do with how much. Let's try. Don't know.
That's a doozy.
Yeah, we'll have to investigate that more. I'm gonna be like thinking about that one for
Yeah.
half an hour
But
after the
I think
call.
it's like I want to understand it because
Yeah,
it's obviously there for something. For some reason.
yeah, good question. We'll figure it out. Yeah, and then this sort of wraps it up. So yeah, I learned a couple of things from that blog post, and
Yeah,
one
that's awesome.
mystery that I want to learn what's going on. And I'll probably learn something from deep diving into that. But yeah, we might have to follow up with that one next week.
Yeah, next stream.
I thought this blog post, just moving on very quickly since we're running out of time, from Paul Calvano. He has this great investigation into different compression modes, and even more, he built like this compression tester, which I thought was pretty incredible. So if I go and put my site into this, I will go out and like look at what compression is used for different resources on my site. So I'm still using gzip for, I guess, 16 and a half kilobyte on my site, and Brotli for another 16 kilobyte. And then it like guesses at what compression level you get, because when you're using these different mechanisms of compression, a lot of them are like built into your hosting provider if you're not applying these manually. And you can actually squeeze more kilobyte out if you want to spend sort of more compute to get a higher level of compression. So you can kind of see that it looked at the raw size and ran it through all of these different compression sizes and could have gotten quite a bit more. But you can see that even if you go up to Brotli level 11, it takes like almost 200. It takes 200 milliseconds to do that compression. So it's not something that would be applied at the hosting level. And to me, this all comes back to like static versus dynamic things. And there's a sort of web performance like maximum you can hit when you have a dynamic site, I used to so on my previous host for my personal site, I used to manually Brotli encode all of my assets because the host didn't support Brotli compression.
Mm,
Um, and so at build time, I would like compress all of my sort of static assets using Brotli and serve the appropriate headers for those. And yeah, I could have used whatever compression level I wanted.
mm,
And I could have gotten whatever I wanted out of it because I didn't have to worry about that constraint of like, there's that maximum amount of resources that the dynamic host will allow me to use.
mm.
Um, and see,
I
I
wonder
think
if
my host. Sorry, go
is
ahead.
there a is there a on the decompression, I wonder if there's a difference in timing or compute as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. When the client downloads it.
Because like if let's say those numbers are the same for decompression, which they're probably not, but
Mm,
now you're adding 0.2 of a second to decompression, and it's like, well, that's that's not worth it for that last jump.
yeah, yeah. That's a very good question. I think that would be something we should ask Paul. Maybe hit him up on Mastodon, see what
Mm.
it is, see what's up with that. Because yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Paul,
But
you
you
got
would think it goes both ways, right?
Paul, you're about to have the static site fan club army come after you.
So much feedback.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love this tool, and I love that there's this that you can kind of see the next step in the evolution of things. There's like this new compression standard, I think, from Facebook called Z standard, and yeah, it can go all the way down to I guess it's not quite as good as
Mm.
Brotli for here, but it's much faster. So there's all of these like benefits and drawbacks, and people are working on these things, and yeah, I think it's good to be aware of the different kinds of compression
Yeah, it's a
because it can really
spectrum.
save
It's
you some
not
money
like
too.
just like, oh, I mean, just having compression makes a world of difference, but
Mm,
it's like it's pretty significant, the difference between level 1 and level 11 on Brotli.
right. Yeah. And I think most hosts are usually around 5 or 6 level of compression.
Yeah, makes sense.
Um, but yeah, that's great. I wanted to shout out to Westbrook. They're actually working on this. I've sort of been following this for a while, but there's this new web component specifications that are being worked out around declarative web components. So we have declarative shadow DOM, which is like a way to put your shadow DOM markup in your component definition. But I also want like a way to declare a component definition in a single place and allow that to be used in uh, a bunch of different places on my page. So it's just a way to I think save some JavaScript, which I think is great. Um, and yeah, just keep an eye on this space. They're sort of iterating on it right now. If you want to follow along more closely, definitely check out Westbrook. Follow them on Mastodon because they are talking about it quite a bit.
Nice.
And if you watched my web components talk last year, I sort of went through why this is good. So if you want to learn more about that too. I think maybe the biggest news for me this week is the future versions of Node.js will allow you to require an ESM package. This is something we've sort of been waiting on for a very long time. There's been this dichotomy of require or import, and you couldn't require an ESM package in a common JS like version of your code. And so it sort of created this like wall between common JS and ESM formats of code. And anyone that's following the 11D project is probably aware of this because we've been talking about it a lot with the 3.0 release as we add ESM support. Um, and I do think that ESM is still going to be the standard moving forward, but this will, I think, alleviate a lot of headaches around compatibility between common JS and ESM code. Um, and yeah, I think it's great. I think this is like game changing news of the year almost,
Mm.
definitely of the month for me.
So
Um,
what will it mean for 11T? Will it mean like if you weren't doing all this ESM work that I can just use ESM modules?
yeah, so if you go out to the 11D blog, and we have this like calling all courageous canary testers for 3.0, we have these sort of section here in the blog post, how to require 11D in CommonJS. And with 3.0, we have this workaround. You have to use dynamic import. You couldn't do this in 11D 3.0 because 11D is a ESM package in 3.0. And
Got it.
so you'll be able to do that. It will be
Yeah,
more
that's
straightforward
awesome.
and you won't have to use this workaround. So yeah, I think anything where you don't have to document these workarounds and it will just work right out of the box is a win. And it won't have to dual publish code. That's really the thing that is a huge pain in the butt. And I think a lot of people just aren't doing it. Is dual publishing their packages because you have to sort of transpile it, and there's a lot of extra work and maintenance that goes into that. And I think it's just better to sort of go ESM whenever you can moving forward. But for legacy projects, they're going to be CommonJS, so breaking those walls down is great. I think we're just gonna have to rapid fire through these because I don't have like a ton of. I
Yeah.
have like 3 minutes left. Robin Rendell has this great blog post about scoping CSS, how to kill the cascade, and you sort of always hear about this, especially around sort of Tailwind documentation. People want to kill the cascade as much as possible because of the side effects that can happen when the cascade is applied. And Robin goes through this great sort of storytelling walkthrough of the different steps you can do with the new at scope CSS feature and using this scope selector. So without using Shadow DOM, so Shadow DOM in web components has typically been what folks have recommended to scope CSS, and there are a whole bunch of like other concerns that get shipped together with those things, and so people are trying to not use Shadow DOM for as a default, and scope allows you to do that. So I think maybe it's best summed up by this example where you're sort of styling every element inside of this my component instance to be red, and this is red, but any sort of text outside of it will be blue. This is all to do with modern CSS features, and I think this is amazing and game-changing, and I love it. Because it is sort of dependent on where the style is. The style block is inserted in your markup, the hierarchy of your markup, besides the scope.
Which is like intuitively how you would think it would work. Like if you
Yeah,
have nested
especially
style
from a
tables.
component layer
Mm.
and component definitions. That's I think that's going to be huge, and I'll probably add some like WebC support for that.
Thanks for
That
joining
approach
Smiling
too.
Boost.
All right, later. Anna Tudor sort of introduced me to this brand new overflow wrap anywhere CSS property, which I think is just another way to sort of break your long words up. So you would often see this is like the CSS is awesome meme, where it like overflows out of the container. But if you break it up, then it will sort of break that word up as well. And I've seen this a lot on my personal site where I have those giant titles in my blog posts, and if the word is too long, it will sometimes break my layout. So yeah, I think this is great. Dan Liu had this really great web performance blog post about measuring web bloat, and they sort of took all of these very common sites and saw the sort of size of them and tested them on some older devices. And this is, I think, one of the things that Alex Russell has been talking about a lot. And Alex Russell has a bunch of blog posts about this, but it was you can sort of very obviously see the failure rates for these slower devices here as the sites get bigger and bigger. So yeah, I think it's a great shout out to keeping things small and focused and keeping your code base tight. Otherwise, you're just going to lose people because these are still very common.
Wix 21 megabytes, is that real world?
Yeah. Yeah.
Jeez.
And it's just kind of
I
incredible.
remember
And
I remember like
yeah,
early
go ahead.
2000s downloading this game that was 20 megabytes on 56k
Yeah.
internet, and I like waited I think 2 hours for it to download, and I was so excited.
Yeah.
Now that's a web page.
Yeah. One visit to one web page. And
You
that's not
got
even this,
Wixed.
that's like, I feel like that's the biggest one here, but I don't feel like that is an incredibly uncommon thing to see now. Like 10
Mm.
megabyte for Blue Sky. That's like
Mm.
almost the norm. And you can go out to HTTP archive and see those average numbers grow over time. There was another great blog post that we don't have to go through a bunch today, but I think it's someone that's working in the either Vue.js or Vite ecosystem around mental health and open source. And I don't know, this really resonated with me. And yeah, I thought it's definitely worth reading if you're an open source developer. Yeah, because I think it's important because I think open source can be exploited if it's not thought of in the right way. And I think some companies are not great at this. And some companies are really great at this. But yeah, I think it's worth being aware of this problem, and yeah, this is a great post about it. And then lastly, I had just this post from Sime. I don't know. I actually don't know. I've been following this person for years and years and years, but I've never said their name out loud. So yeah, that's awkward, but I don't know how to say their name out loud. But there's a new specification or a change to the specification for 100 VW. So if you're using that CSS unit, a lot of times you'll get horizontal overflow in different scenarios in which the browser has those sort of stable scroll bars that aren't always visible. And I always, on all of my browsers, I use the system property for like stable scroll bars. You can probably barely see that on the side, but my scroll bars are always visible and always clickable. I don't use the hover scroll bars because I like to know what sites are handling this problem and what sites aren't. And I guess it's nice that this is going away at the specification level, but I think a lot of folks have solved this problem with overflow X hidden, which is just not a great way to solve it, but that is what it is. So it's nice to see the improvement to the specification is coming. Because yeah, if you have that enabled, I think if you go to your system settings, there's like that was it right there. Show scroll bars always. I think it's the default is like automatically based on mouse or trackpad. But yeah, I use always because it shows CSS bugs. So yeah, I think that's probably where we should stop. We can do the web component. We don't have time for web component roundup again, but
Yeah, maybe we should start with it next time. We can't
yeah.
leave web components off the stream.
We did talk a little bit about web components, but just no shout outs to individual web components today.
Nice. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks Ricky. Thanks Stefan. Thanks Bob and everyone else. We'll see you next week.
Later, y'all.